So welcome back to another episode, and today we're going to talk about DJ Boy, the series, the arcade game, the Genesis game, the Japanese version, the differences, the confusion, the insanity that is DJ Boy. And we've spent the last couple of days going through all these games, and quite the trip down memory lane, and kind of crazy, this game. It's just absolutely nuts. Like, for me, I originally played DJ Boy in the arcade. It was an arcade game, and I was absolutely taken by it. And I'd look for it. Trust me, I have this binder full of my old comics I used to draw in high school, and I used to do these DJ Boy comics because I thought the main character was so awesome. And I couldn't find it for this review, so if I ever find it in the future, I'll definitely bring it out. But so the funny thing is I played the arcade game, and I thought it was really great. The graphics are great on it.
Yeah, and when we played it, it holds up. It's still a good fighting game. Definitely feels very 80s, but it's still a fun fighting game.
And when it came to the Genesis, and I thought it was a Sega game at that point, which I was completely wrong about. It's not a Sega game, it's a Kaneko. I thought it was an absolute Sega mascot. I don't know why. I thought DJ Boy was a Sega mascot. They were really kind of, pun intended, pimping it in the beginning and all that. So where do you want to start off talking about it? Maybe the arcade game?
Probably the arcade game is the best place to start because that's what started it for you. So 5 total stages.
Yeah.
It seems like the arcade game was just like many other quarter munchers. It was just an excuse to get you to feed the quarters in for the game for, 30, 40 minutes, however long it took you to beat the game. And based on what we can tell from the limited starting cinematic, you're DJ Boy, you're breakdancing on the street, and a gang of thugs steals your boombox, and you start chasing them.
And Wolfman Jack does the narration. He goes, DJ Boy!
Hey, God, DJ Boy, what you think you're doing?
And it's like, what the fuck is Wolfman Jack?
And he gets a credit on the title screen.
I know, he was a popular DJ disc jockey back in the day, and just to hear him, I'm like, even to Angela, I'm like, was he still alive when they did DJ Boy? Like,
must have been.
And it's like, well, who was thinking, like, we need to get him announcing this, and
I don't know what, I certainly don't think of Wolfman Jack when I think of breakdancing kids in the 80s, but hey, I'm not in marketing.
This is an unusual, let me say to begin with, an unusual look at American culture by the Japanese, and
That's a good point.
And a really unusual look, a very stereotypical look, and we'll get into that. What it is it's a side view action game where you're fighting punks on the streets of different cities, and it's always pushing you forward. It's always scrolling.
And pretty much everybody's on roller skates.
And everybody's on roller skates. That's the thing, and there's a lot of... So, the Genesis game has a few moves. You have a punch, a kick, and a jump. Very limited. Not much more than a jump kick.
And a jump kick, right.
Yeah, but in the arcade game, you have a lot more variations. You have a backflip move that you do on enemies, and so the arcade was a lot more robust. Its graphics are very, very good for back then.
Right, and you got punch and kick combos as well. It's not just the same static punch.
Yeah, frames of animation are better. In the Genesis game, the animation is not so hot.
Not so hot.
Not so hot at all. And the music, we were talking about it too, the music in the arcade is really pretty good.
Yeah.
It's catchy, it doesn't annoy you. In the home console version, it annoys you a little bit because it's not very good.
And it's very repetitive.
Very repetitive. But we were saying that later on, you heard Streets of Rage music. This was an early Genesis game. Oh, if this game had come out a little bit later, the Genesis version, it would have been a lot more closer.
Certainly,
to
the Genesis
arcade.
is capable of much better, as you would see in Streets of Rage 2.
Yeah. So, what was the first level in the arcade version?
It was a town. Basically, it picks up right from when the thugs steal your boombox, and you start chasing them down the road.
Yeah.
And you work your way through the town, and you come across a trolley car. There's a lady on the car who throws dynamite at you.
Yeah. The woman is different, who's throwing the dynamite at you from the arcade to the Genesis version of it. Then, I'll take us into this because this is crazy.
Yeah.
And we played the Genesis version first, and we're like, oh, we're fighting this big pink woman. And we're like, oh, how unusual is this? And then all of a sudden I was like, wait a second.
Like, she's practically lobster colored. It's really weird.
Yeah, the color's really, you're like, what's going on here? And I kind of remember back to the arcade, I'm like, wait, there's something about this. And then when we played the arcade game, we're like, oh my god. And the Mega Drive version, we're like, oh my god. It's such a stereotype on a black African woman. It is terrible.
Yeah.
Like, you would never see this now, and we were like, oh my god, this is like terrible. We couldn't believe that they would allow this in the arcade game. You know, like, so
Japan's a very different place.
And in the arcade game, this woman, I'm not making this up, she farts on you.
She literally lifts her skirt up and farts.
That's what her attack is on you. And in the Genesis version, there is still a fart. I'm trying to remember.
No, there's no farting in the Genesis version, but there is farting in the Mega Drive version.
But it's side.
But instead of farting at the screen, she farts to the side.
Yeah. It's just bizarre. You just get, it's one of those things you get to this character and you're like, what? Like, what are the Japanese doing?
And what does this big lady have to do with the punks who stole your boombox? Who knows?
I don't know. We don't know. We'll move on from now. What was the next stage in the arcade game?
It takes place in the subway and on a subway train.
I kind of like that stage. I thought it was really good. And then you get to the end boss in that stage, which is a Chippendale guy. You know what I mean? Like, the first time we got to him, we're like, wow, they're really being interesting with these bosses. Like, what the fuck is going on here?
Yeah, I don't know why this nearly naked guy, basically wearing sunglasses and a thong, comes dancing out of the side of the screen, and yeah.
That's the subway for you back then.
There's your boss. And what's curious about the arcade game is that before you get to the final boss in the second stage, you fight a sub-boss. And he's a blonde-haired, mohawk, punk-looking guy.
Oh, yeah.
And interestingly enough, on the Genesis and the Mega versions, he shows up as the boss in the fifth stage.
Yeah.
So they reuse the sprite, but in a totally different way.
Yeah. It was so unusual. Like, the end bosses are different in this game, and we're going to get to them,
very
too.
Different.
So the next stage, stage 3, is the casino stage.
Right. It starts out in sort of the streets of maybe sort of a prototypical Vegas, and as DJ Boy is skating his way forward, he eventually goes inside the casino.
Now, this is where there's some more differences, is that you fight like a big boss character in here who seems to like own the casino.
Looks like a pit boss or something like that. But he's this giant sprite on the screen, and then you kick him and he shrinks down into a smaller sprite so you can get past him. It's weird. It's the same look. It's just a smaller sprite. It's weird.
Yeah, and the slot machines in this version, where in these versions there's no slot machines.
Right. In the home versions, you don't even enter a casino. The entire game plays out in the streets of Vegas.
Yes. And there's a difference, too, in the Mega Drive version, the girls, right?
Right. Interestingly enough, we're typically used to the Japanese version being the superior version, but there was more animation going on in the Genesis version. In this stage in particular, there were foreground elements where there were sort of neon dancing girls as you skated through the streets. And they're completely missing in the Mega version. They're not there at all.
This game is such a mystery in the sense that every version is different, and we're writing down all the versions. We're like, oh my god, this is different. This is different. Like there was things in the DJ Boy that would say like 666 in the back that was different than the Mega Drive game. You'd be like, wouldn't that be in the Mega Drive game? And
Exactly.
Not in the American version?
So the Mega Drive didn't have this. John's talking about the second stage where there are subway cars that are spray painted, and in the Genesis North American version, there's 666 spray painted on some of the cars. That's not in the Mega version.
Very strange.
It's weird. It's like some editing happened, but some didn't, and some of the additions are just strange.
Yeah. So who's the end boss of the casino level in the arcade game?
So in the arcade, it's actually kind of cool. As you're skating through the casino where the slot machines are, you end up on stage. And then this platform rises up, and there's this basically metal band on the stage. And they're fighting you. One guy's swinging his microphone stand at you, and the guitarist is swinging his guitar at you. And that's who you're battling.
Yeah, that's so unusual. Like, I was like, what the hell's going on?
So the next stage after that is a construction site. They're skating along girders and an incompleted building and fighting these same kind of random elements. This stage introduces an interesting jumping mechanic because it's not just straight streets anymore. You're actually having to jump between iron girders. And if you miss, you fall. Interestingly enough, it's not insta-death. You just respawn right back up on the platform, having lost some life. So oddly enough, you get to the edge of the building in the arcade version, and you jump off the building. And you basically jump like 6 stories down into a junkyard.
to those two guys. One of them was from earlier on. The guy who was in the end versions of these ones is now there as a fire-wielding guy with his brother,
Right.
who you fight as well.
The blonde mohawk guy from the second level in the arcade is there with his pink-colored brother in the junkyard, and now you're fighting them two at a time.
Yeah. So after that, then we move on to the cowboy stage, and we get all the way through a bunch of enemies and stuff like that. And this is the last stage of the game in the arcade. And then you fight the two stereotypes of the women from the earlier one, the farting women. You fight two of them, and the game is over. So that is the arcade game, which is a very short arcade game meant for 2 players to play. And that's the thing, when you get to the Megadrive and Genesis version, it's a 1-player only game. And I swear to God they could have done 2 players, but who am I to say? They were able to pull it off in Streets of Rage and stuff like that.
Yeah, clearly the hardware was capable of it, so
Yeah.
maybe this was just a launch game kind of thing.
Yeah, it really seemed like it. And man, what do you want to talk about with, say, the Genesis version that comes to mind?
I guess maybe the most interesting thing is the differences between the Genesis version and the Mega Drive version. They're very similar, and that means they're both quite different from the arcade. For example, they don't have any Wild West stage. They change up the bosses, and both of the home versions are actually 6 levels long. And the 6th level is just a single room where you fight a martial arts lady who's looks a lot like the boss from the first level, but she's wearing a red gi and has some different karate kind of moves. It's actually a very grindy fight.
Oh, and it's horribly long. And we were sitting there looking at each other and going, oh my God. Yeah. That's the one thing. The arcade game is a quarter muncher. You're really enjoying it as you're playing it. These games are torture. These are not good games, unfortunately. But they were early Genesis games, so I was like, oh my God, I have to play because it's an early Genesis game.
And the really remarkable thing about the home versions is they add almost an RPG layer to the way the arcade played. For example, in the home version, you're not fighting these bad guys because they steal your stereo. They apparently have wedged in the rescuing of a girlfriend.
Yeah.
She appears in the opening cinematics. Interestingly enough, the Mega version has some opening cinematics. The Genesis version does not.
Yeah.
So you start the Genesis version. There isn't even music during the start screen on the Genesis version.
Yeah.
We were wondering if there's something wrong with the TV.
Yeah, I was like, is there something going on?
But you're there to rescue the girl. I guess that's how you do things in home versions.
Yeah, and the Mega Drive version has some nice anime. It
did.
I don't know. I bet they were thinking maybe we're pitching this to America. Maybe we'll remove the anime because anime still wasn't big over here. So,
and each of the home versions add a between level item shop. So as you're skating around and fighting, you're earning coins. You don't get anything in the arcade. You're just defeating the enemies to progress. But in the home versions, you get coins, and you spend the coins in the item shop. And you can buy things like health, because you don't get health back automatically. You've got to buy hamburgers at the item shop.
Yeah, and punches.
Right, and you can increase
powerful.
your number of hit points and buy a more powerful punch and buy this cat thing that we never figured out what it did.
Oh yeah, that stupid thing and all that. So, what's been the other final changes?
So the other big difference is in the 5th stage. In the Mega Drive version, you're just on a wharf at night, and you're progressing side to side like in the other levels. But interestingly enough, in the Genesis version, you start off and quickly end up in a ring, like an actual boxing ring, and you have to refight all of the bosses again, in order from the previous stages. Sort of like a boss rush mode that's built into the 5th stage.
Yeah, that was unusual.
Yeah, and then after you complete that, you go on to fight the final boss in the 6th stage.
Man, oh man, this game was hard. This game is a very tough slog, that's for sure. It's when I was telling Andrew, I'm like, oh, I remember playing this when I was a kid. It was easier. I don't know what. I must have had a lot of time on my hands or something, which I did have, but I don't even know. We just wanted to talk about DJ Boy. It was a game that I remember from the early Genesis, from the arcade, that had an impact on me. It was something interesting. As I said, I thought it was a Sega mascot, but it was not at the time. And what do you take away from DJ Boy?
It's interesting. I never really had a strong affiliation with DJ Boy back in the day, and that's still true today.
Yeah, it's not one of those games where we're recommending saying this is an excellent game.
Right.
It's just an unusual experience, and as we started playing the different versions, all the differences we're scratching our heads going, wow, there's so many differences in all the versions.
Right. We're certainly used to getting watered down arcade ports back in those days. Yeah. And obviously there's cultural differences between Japan and international releases. But there was just so much different about this game. We just had to talk about
It
it.
was absolutely staggering. So, guys, give DJ Boy a try on the Genesis. You'll pull your hair out. On the arcade, you'll have a much better experience. So,
Yeah.
anyways, guys, until next time.